The smell hits you before anything else. Rotting vegetables, animal dung, smoke, and something worse underneath it all that you can't quite name but your stomach already knows. You're standing on a narrow Roman street at dawn, the stone beneath your feet slick with last night's waste thrown from windows 6 floors above, and around you the city is already in full motion. Cart drivers screaming at each other, street vendors shouting in Latin you don't understand, children running between the legs of men in tunics who look through you like you don't exist. A body lies against the wall 20 feet away, and nobody stops. Nobody looks. A dog investigates it with more interest than any human passerby. This is Rome at its height, the greatest city in the ancient world, home to over 1 million people, the capital of an empire stretching from Britain to Mesopotamia. And you have been here for less than 3 minutes, and already the odds are stacking against you in ways you haven't even begun to understand yet, because the city itself, before any soldier or senator or slave master touches you, is already working to kill you quietly, methodically, and without any personal malice whatsoever. Start with the water, because everyone needs it, and Rome's relationship with it is the perfect contradiction of the entire empire. Breathtaking engineering that delivered slow poison directly to your lips. The aqueducts were genuine marvels, 11 of them feeding the city, carrying millions of gallons of fresh water across arched stone structures that still partially stand today, and Romans were rightfully proud of them. But that water traveled through lead pipes, lead-lined cisterns, and lead-coated vessels, and Romans cooked with it, drank it, bathed in it, and seasoned their wine with lead acetate because it made the taste sweeter. Modern skeletal analysis of Roman remains shows lead levels so elevated they would constitute acute poisoning by any contemporary medical standard. Chronic lead exposure causes nerve damage, cognitive decline, aggressive behavior, reproductive failure, and a creeping madness that feels indistinguishable from bad luck or bad character until it's far too late to reverse. Then add the air inside the insula, the massive apartment blocks where 90% of Rome's population lived, where charcoal braziers burned constantly for heat and cooking, filling rooms with carbon monoxide and particulate smoke, where 7 or 8 people shared a single room with no ventilation, where tuberculosis and respiratory infections moved through the building like water through a sieve. The Romans had no germ theory. They had no concept of why people in the upper floors died faster. They called it bad air, malaria, and accepted it as the gods' business, not theirs. Now understand where you're living, because this matters enormously. The wealthy Romans, senators, merchants, senior military men, occupied the ground floor domus, the private mansion wrapped around a courtyard with its own garden, its own water supply piped directly in, its own kitchen staff, its own world. You are not living there. You are living on the 5th or 6th floor of an insula, a timber-framed apartment building that the Roman architect Vitruvius himself warned were structurally dangerous, that routinely collapsed under their own weight, that caught fire from a knocked-over brazier and burned entire blocks before anyone could respond. Emperor Augustus had to create Rome's first organized fire brigade, the Vigils, not out of civic compassion, but because the city kept burning down and it was becoming a political embarrassment. Your apartment has no running water, which means every drop you need must be hauled up 5 flights of stairs from the street-level fountain. It has no sewage connection, which means waste goes into a pot, and the pot goes out the window, and the street below is why the Romans invented platform shoes. You pay rent to a landlord who has no legal obligation to repair anything, who can evict you without notice, and who raises your rent whenever he pleases because there are always more desperate people arriving from the countryside than there are rooms to put them in. Here is where your fate in Rome is actually decided, not by your character, not by your intelligence, not by anything you do, but by the circumstance of your birth, and specifically whether you are free, freedman, plebeian, or slave. Historians estimate that between 30 and 40% of the population of Rome at its peak were enslaved human beings, which means the single most likely reality for any random person dropped into Rome is not citizenship, not poverty, but bondage with no legal existence whatsoever. As an enslaved person in Rome, you were property. You could be sold, beaten, sexually used, worked to death in the mines or on the agricultural estates, crucified for running away, or executed on your master's word without trial. If you were free but poor, a plebeian with no patron, no trade guild, no military record, You existed in a permanent state of managed desperation, dependent on the grain dole that kept you fed just enough not to riot, dependent on a patron whose favor could disappear overnight, crowded into the insulae, working dawn to dusk for wages that barely covered rent. The Roman citizen class had legal rights on paper that looked impressive. The right to trial, protection from certain punishments, the ability to vote in the assemblies. But in practice, those rights required money, connections, and a patron powerful enough to enforce them. And without all three, the paper meant nothing at all. If by some combination of luck and stubbornness you decided the legions were your way out, and for a poor free man, they genuinely were the most reliable ladder available, understand exactly what you were signing. The Roman military contract was 25 years of active service, during which you marched an average of 20 miles every single day in full kit. A rectangular shield, 2 javelins, a gladius short sword, a Delabra pickaxe, cooking equipment, personal rations, and body armor, totaling somewhere between 35 and 45 kilograms on your back and shoulders in the Mediterranean heat. Before you ever saw combat, the march itself broke men. Feet destroyed, joints wrecked, heat stroke, dysentery from contaminated camp water, and officers who flogged you for falling out of formation. When combat did come, Roman fighting was not the cinematic sweep of swords at distance. It was a grinding, suffocating press of bodies in a formation so tight you could smell the fierce sweat of the man beside you, stabbing upward with a short blade at close range, close enough to feel the breath of the man trying to kill you on your face. Survive that. Survive 25 years. Survive the politics of commanders who might march you into a catastrophe for their own ambition. And at the end, Rome gave you a land grant and citizenship, assuming the empire hadn't collapsed around you in the meantime. The punishment system in Rome operated on a principle so nakedly brutal that it at least had the honesty not to pretend otherwise. Your suffering was calibrated precisely to your social class, and the lower you stood, the more your body was considered an appropriate site for the state's message to everyone watching. Honestiores, the upper classes, faced fines, exile, or dignified execution when convicted. Humiliores, the poor, the freed, the non-citizen, faced flogging. Mutilation, condemnation to the mines or the arena. The mines were a death sentence measured in months rather than years. Men worked underground in total darkness, chained, fed minimally, breathing rock dust that destroyed lungs within a season, and when they could no longer work, they were left where they fell. Crucifixion was reserved specifically for the powerless, slaves and non-citizens, as a public spectacle designed to last days and be witnessed by as many people as possible, the pain and humiliation functioning as a message written in flesh on the road into the city. Informants were legally rewarded with a portion of a convicted person's confiscated property, which meant your neighbor, your colleague, your freedman employee had a direct financial incentive to report you for anything that could be construed as criminal, disloyal, or impious. And under certain emperors, the definition of those terms shifted weekly. Torture of enslaved witnesses was not merely permitted in Roman courts, but legally mandated. Their testimony was inadmissible without it. And the screaming from the testimony rooms was simply background noise in the Roman legal system, as unremarkable as the crowds outside. And yet you cannot look at Rome without being struck, actually struck, the way a physical thing strikes you, by what human beings built inside all of this. The Pantheon's dome, unreinforced concrete, still standing after 2,000 years. Roads so precisely engineered that their routes are still used by modern highways. A legal framework so sophisticated that it became the foundation for the legal systems of most of Europe, Latin America, and beyond. A literature that gave us Virgil, Ovid, Cicero, Marcus Aurelius writing his private philosophical notes with no intention of anyone ever reading them. A man trying to be good in a world that rewarded brutality. The Romans built aqueducts in Britain, theaters in North Africa, temples in Syria, an empire of stone and law and language that shaped the next 2,000 years of human civilization in ways so deep most people living inside those systems have never once thought to ask where they came from. The question that should sit with you after this video isn't whether you could have survived in Rome. Almost certainly you couldn't, not long, not comfortably, and if you were unlucky enough to arrive without citizenship or connections, probably not at all. The question is what it means that human beings capable of the Pantheon, capable of Stoic philosophy, capable of the most sophisticated legal code the ancient world produced, also built an entertainment industry around public death and a punishment system that carved class hierarchy directly into human skin. Drop your answer in the comments. And if this video made you grateful that your bad day involves traffic and a slow Wi-Fi connection rather than a lead water pipe and a landlord who throws bodies in the street, you know what to do.